I realized I was going to die long before it happened, not through a sudden shock or a moment of screaming panic, but through a quiet certainty that settled into my life like dust you stop noticing because it has always been there. It began with the notes. Small, carefully folded pieces of paper appeared around my apartment, on the kitchen counter, beside my bed, tucked into books I hadn't opened in years. They were written in my handwriting, neat and familiar, and they gave instructions for things I had not yet done. Simple things at first. Lock the door at midnight. Leave the lamp on. Open the window before sleeping. I laughed the first few times, convinced I had written them myself during some absent-minded moment, but that explanation collapsed when the notes started predicting events before they occurred. They mentioned rain hours before the sky darkened, named strangers I would meet later that day, and quoted sentences people had not yet spoken. The apartment itself began to feel involved, as if it had been briefed. Lights flicked on just before I entered a room. The hallway felt longer at night, the walls narrowing slightly when I walked through it. The floorboards creaked only when I stepped into the darkest corners, never when I tried to listen for them. Every night, without fail, the kitchen clock stopped at 2:17, its hands frozen, as if time itself had decided to pause and observe. I replaced the batteries. I replaced the clock. The new one stopped at the same minute. Sleep became unreliable. When I did sleep, I dreamed of my own body lying on the living room floor, the scene arranged with unsettling care. Furniture positioned precisely, curtains half open, a calm, almost respectful silence surrounding me, like a boundary no sound was allowed to cross. The dreams never changed. They didn't feel symbolic or abstract. They felt like documentation. I tried to break the pattern. I stayed out all night, slept during the day, skipped meals, changed my routes through the city, spoke to strangers I normally ignored. The notes adapted instantly, correcting me, anticipating every attempt to disrupt whatever schedule I was trapped inside. There was no anger in them, no threats, only patience. That was what frightened me most. Whatever was guiding this had no urgency. It had already accounted for every version of my resistance. Stranger things followed. I would catch myself standing in rooms without remembering how I got there. I found bruises on my arms shaped like careful fingerprints. Once, I discovered a printed floor plan of my apartment folded inside a drawer, red ink marking a precise outline on the living room floor. I threw it away, only to find it again the next morning, neatly returned. The sense of being rehearsed grew stronger, like my days were repetitions of something already finalized elsewhere. On the final morning, the apartment felt finished, clean. Still, the last note waited on the bathroom mirror, the handwriting slower and heavier, as if written with deliberate care. It read, "You've arrived." I stared at my reflection for a long time, expecting fear to rise, but instead I felt calm, almost relieved. The air smelled faintly metallic. The walls seemed closer than before. The silence carried a low pressure, like a held breath. When I stepped into the living room, everything was exactly as it had been in my dreams. The chair angled toward the window. The table shifted slightly to the left. Even the light fell in the same narrow strip across the floor. I remember thinking how unnecessary panic felt in that moment. There was nothing left to change. Whatever was coming had already happened somewhere beyond my understanding. I never saw who or what delivered the final blow. It arrived cleanly, efficiently, like punctuation at the end of a sentence already complete. Pain was brief, almost courteous. As I lay there, awareness thinning but not gone, I understood the truth that had followed me from the beginning. This death had not been caused by chance or violence alone. It had been prepared, planned patiently, revised until perfect. My final thought was not terror, but recognition. I had never been chased or hunted. I had been scheduled. And now, exactly on time, the plan was complete.